Where is Israel in a few years from now?
So if you look at the main beneficiary of this war, it is Israel. Because Israel has an ambition called the Greater Israel Project, which is what they believe that their God, Yahweh, promised to their ancestor, Abraham. And so they believe that Yahweh promised Abraham all the land from the Nile in Egypt to Euphrates in Iraq. If you look at the entire map, it also extends to Anatolia, which is southern Turkey, and even into Saudi Arabia. So if you look at what's happening, well, it's convenient in that the GCC is being destroyed. Saudi Arabia will probably be drawn into this war. It is possible Turkey will be drawn into this war as well. And this war allows Israel to remake the Middle East in its own image. Also, if you think about it, according to game theory, the main constraint to Israel achieving the Greater Israel Project is actually not Iran, but America, because America guarantees the military safety and protection of the GCC, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Kuwait, Bahrain, UAE, these nations. And so if Israel is become dominant, it's become the hegemon of the Middle East, it needs to figure out how to remove America from the equation. And quite honestly, this war has shown the limitations of American power. It's really annoyed the American people. The American people do not want this war. And American people don't even understand why America is still in the Middle East. And so it's very possible that regardless of what happens in this war, America is forced to withdraw from the Middle East, in which case Israel is able to achieve its Greater Israel Project.
Standard security cameras cannot prevent break-ins. They can help catch burglars after they've done it, but that's a little late, no? They can steal your stuff, scare your family, maybe hurt you. You need a security system that will stop home invasions before they occur. That's why we always recommend SimpliSafe. SimpliSafe is a whole home security system backed by 24/7 monitoring agents you can rely on, even when you're gone. Proactive crime prevention, it's not reactive, and that makes the difference. Plus, no required long-term contract that gives you flexibility to switch if you don't like it. That's unlikely, though, because we think SimpliSafe is excellent, and they're so confident in the protection, they back it with an anti-theft guarantee. Used by over 4 million people, 20 years of experience, named Best Home Security System of 2026. It's the peak of the industry. And right now, listeners to this show can get 50% off their new SimpliSafe system at simplisafe.com/Tucker. It's simplisafe.com/Tucker. There is no safe like SimpliSafe. It was clear to me that was part of the motive, that Israel understood this and roped the United States into this war in order to get the United States out, in order to hurt the United States and get the United States out of the Middle East. Do you think that will be successful?
I think the way this war is going, this plan will work. And the reason why is the American military has not fought a real war for decades. 2003, this war in Iraq was not a real war because Saddam Hussein basically gave up. He didn't have air defense because those economic sanctions had destroyed his economy. And his logic was this: let the Americans invade. They can't possibly invade because if they destroy us, that would make Iran, which has hostilities against America, the regional power. So why would America do this? It is self-defeating. It is not logical. It is not rational. So I'm not worried about them attacking me. And he was surprised when they did attack because it was not logical. It was not rational. But they did attack. It was a cakewalk. It took about 2 weeks. America achieved air supremacy very quickly, and they rolled into Baghdad very, very quickly and toppled the regime. So that was a very quick and easy war that fit the American military doctrine of shock and awe. Iran is completely different. And the American military does not want to fight this war because they've wargamed this countless times. And each war game, they discover that they lose because the American military, it's too bulky. It's not as nimble and resilient as the Iranian military. And we're seeing that play out right now where you have these devastating carriers, the Abraham Lincoln and the Gerald Ford, threatening Iran, but not actually doing anything because they're afraid of getting too close to the coast of Iran because then they become susceptible to drone strikes as well as hypersonics. So the Iranians have been preparing this for 20 plus years. They know the entire American playbook, and they have the perfect strategy to counter the American playbook. So America will have a really tough time winning this war. The great problem, okay, the big question now is, will America send in ground troops? Because once America sends in ground troops, then it becomes pot committed. It's mission creep, sunk cost fallacy. It'll be like Vietnam all over. So right now there's talk of 2,500 Marines who've coming in from Okinawa. They'll be in the Middle East in about 7 days' time. And the rumor is, and I don't know, but the rumor is the intention is for them to take Karg Island, which is the main oil depot for Iran. So Iran exports 9% of its oil from that facility, the island. And if the Marines were to take it, it would be great optics. You know, Trump would look good on TV. It'd be a great boost for for American morale. The problem is that you can take it, but you can't hold it because it's too close to Iranian coast, and the Iranians can attack with artillery, with drones. Okay, which means that you now have to take on the coast. You have to occupy the coast and create a forward operating base. But then you're exposed to the Zagros Mountains, right? Which means that you're now forced to occupy the mountains as well. So it's mission creep. It's exactly like Vietnam, where in 1965, 3,000 Marines went into Dak Nang to occupy an air base. And like 4 or 5 years later, you have 500,000 troops, right? So it started off as a very limited, self-defined mission, but then it just balloons. So America could find itself in this situation very quickly.
If you were the commander-in-chief of the United States, what would you do at this point as of today?
Commander-in-chief meaning Donald Trump?
Yeah. You get to make the decision. What does America do next if it's acting in its own interest, if it's trying to preserve its power and wealth at this point? What does it do?
Well, first of all, I would acknowledge that all these events are interconnected, right? So this trade war with China, this war in Ukraine, this war in the Middle East, it's all interconnected because the American empire is too overstretched and it has its fingers on everything. And so it allows its enemies to provoke it into these never-ending wars. So what I would do is basically sit down everyone, okay, including Russia, China, Iran, and say, it's time for a new world order where we are partners in this relationship, right? Before America was the hegemon, before the US dollar was the world reserve currency. But now what we want to do is open a dialogue where everyone is respected, where America is no longer the bully, but a willing partner in creating a new economic order that benefits everyone and not just a few.
I think that's the wisest possible advice and probably the only path that preserves civilization. But the one country standing in the way of that is Israel, which is the only beneficiary of this war, as you just said. I think that's true. Can you think of another beneficiary other than Israel of this war?
Well, Russia benefits, right? Because Russia is trying to win this war in Ukraine.
That's correct.
And America is forced to lift oil sanctions. And so now Russia is now able to take all these war profits, right? And then help the Iranians, finance the Iranians in the struggle against the Americans and Israelis. So the Russians also benefit tremendously from this war.
Yeah, but fair point. Israel has to be constrained by the United States in order to do what you just recommended it do. Is that possible? Does the American president have the authority to control its client state?
So if you look at the domestic situation in Israel, Israel no longer behaves rationally. It is sort of overtaken by eschatological fever, right? So if you look at videos coming out of Israel, there are rabbis going around saying that this war in the Middle East, even though it's destroying Tel Aviv, it's good for us because this will lead to the coming of our Messiah. So they believe that it is when Israel is under the most strain, when the very existence of Israel is threatened, then God will intervene because the Jewish people will come together as a nation again and commit themselves, renew their faith in God. And once God sees the blind, trusting, absolute faith of the Jewish people, then he will save his people by sending his Messiah, who will then redeem the Jewish people. So another way of saying this is secular temporal matters don't really matter. This war in the Middle East, not an issue. What matters is divinity. What matters is our relationship with God.
Yes.
So what matters is faith. If nuclear bombs go flying, doesn't really matter.
It's what's so interesting is that, 25 years ago at 9/11, whatever you think of how that happened and why, there was, I saw it personally, a political Islam. There were Wahhabists. There were a lot of Islamic radicals around the world. And for a bunch of reasons over 25 years, that hasn't disappeared. There still exist Islamic radicals, but it's not, an important political force anymore. At the same time, as Islam in general has become much more moderate, and the GCC is kind of the most obvious example of this, there has been a rise of Jewish Wahhabism and evangelical Christian Wahhabism, so to speak. I mean, you've seen this eschatological extremism among some American Protestants, Christians, and some Israeli and American Jews. How did that happen? What is that?
Right. So first of all, I don't think we can ever overestimate the influence of eschatology in American politics.
Exactly.
So I'll give you an example where about a quarter of Americans are evangelicals, and a lot of them are Christian Zionists. So they believe that Israel is crucial, the linchpin to achieving God's plan and the return of Jesus. And so a very prominent figure that you probably know very well is John Hagee, who runs something called the Christians United for Israel. It's 7 million members. And these are the people who are financing a lot of the conflict in the Middle East, in Israel, because they're the ones who are funding West Bank settlements. And so Christian Zionism, it is an extremely powerful political force in America. So your question is, how did this happen? And
yes,
the issue is that this is a plan that has been in motion for centuries, and it's a very complicated history. But it involves different religious groups among the Jews, Septime Frankists, Shabbat Lubavitch, which you've talked about. But it also involves the Freemasons, the Knights Templars, the Rosicrucians. It involves the Jesuits. So you have these different secret societies, different religious organizations working together through the centuries to achieve this plan for the end of the world, which heralds the Messianic age. Okay, and there are different components of this plan. But the basic components are, one is the creation of the nation state of Israel, which happened in 1948. And then you need to have the building of the third temple, which requires the destruction of the Al-Aqsa Mosque, which is actually, which could happen during this war, given what we've seen so far. So the Israelis have closed off the Al-Aqsa Mosque, as well as other religious sites like the Church of Holy Sepulchre, to tourists these past few days. There's rumors that for the past 2 years, the Israelis have been conducting these archaeological digs under the Al-Aqsa Mosque to basically destroy the foundations of the mosque, so that they can conduct a controlled demolition of the mosque and blame it on a missile strike from the Iranians. And there's actually talk among the Israelis of using this plan to ignite a war between the Arabs and the Persians. So the Al-Aqsa Mosque needs to be destroyed for the third temple. They also talk about this war of Gog and Magog between Israel and the entire world. Then the coming of the Jewish Messiah, the creation of the Greater Israel Project, the return of all Jews from the diaspora. So there are different components to this plan. If you just observe geopolitical events, we're seeing these events converge together today. I mean, all these events are playing out. So it seems as though there are these very powerful shadow forces working behind the scenes. We don't know who they are, but it seems as though they're able to control geopolitics in a certain manner as to fulfill their eschatological script.
What role do you think Donald Trump plays in this?
That's a really hard question to answer. So let's look at different possibilities. Okay, the first possibility is that he's been employed as an actor and he's just following a script, but he doesn't really know where this movie is going. He's just doing his part, but he's manipulated behind the scenes by people around him. And when reporters asked him, like, why is this war in Iran happening? He did say that his advisors, which include Steve Witkoff, Jared Kushner, Peter Hegseth, Marco Rubio, told him that the Iranians were so close to getting a nuclear weapon and that the Iranians were going to attack first. And so I was basically misled. And I think that's probably true in that Trump surrounds himself with certain people that have a certain political eschatological agenda. So that's one possibility, that he's just an actor. Another possibility is that he himself has a messianic calling. Okay. And what I mean by that is, if you go back to January 2021, he was politically dead, right? Because the January 6th riots happened. He was impeached twice. And then after he left office, there was lawfare conducted against him and he went bankrupt. So it was as though the entire world went against him. But now he's president of the United States. And so how would he personally understand this? I think a lot of it is God has asked him to serve. There's a call to serve and he has to fulfill a mission. But what this mission is, okay? What this mission is, whether it's to save Israel, whether it's to save America, whether it's a part of a grander scheme, only he in his heart knows. And I think no one except him knows, okay? So I think that's another possibility. And the third possibility is that this is all Israel's doing. Netanyahu is the one who's forced him into this sort of situation because the Israelis attacked first. And Marco Rubio said this, where, you know what, we wanted these negotiations, but the Israelis were planning to attack. If they attack, the Iranians would be compelled to attack both the Americans and the Israelis. And we did not want to put our soldiers in harm's way, so we attacked with the Israelis. Okay, so it's possible this is all Netanyahu and all his machinations. And another fourth possibility is they have co-opted him. Like, there's blackmail on him. There's and he has absolutely no choice but to do what he says because he's compromised in a certain way, and maybe his family is under threat. So all four are possibilities, and quite honestly, I have no idea which possibility is the most correct.